If you've been living with that non-stop ringing, buzzing, or humming in your ears, and you're tired of feeling like you're the only one who hears it, then stop scrolling and stay right here. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to share something that comes directly from Japan's oldest practicing doctor, yes, the same doctor who has spent over 7 decades studying age-related sensory decline, and he reveals a simple technique that can help stop tinnitus in as little as 30 seconds. And before you think this is just another internet trick, I promise you it is surprisingly logical, rooted in Japanese health principles, and thousands of people swear it brought them relief within minutes. So if you've ever thought, I just want silence again, then relax, take a breath, and listen closely, because today might be the first time you feel real hope. Tinnitus is often misunderstood as a simple ear issue, something caused only by loud sounds or age-related hearing decline. But when you look deeper, you start to realize it's actually a whole-body imbalance that affects the auditory system from multiple angles. That ringing or buzzing that feels like it's coming from deep inside your ear is usually the result of tension, disrupted blood flow, nerve overstimulation, and the brain trying to compensate for missing or distorted sound frequencies. The reason it feels so persistent and hard to escape is because it doesn't originate from just one place. Your ears, your neck, your jaw, your blood vessels, and even your emotional state all play a part in shaping how loud or soft the tinnitus feels. That's why some days it's barely noticeable, and other days it feels like it's screaming in your head. It responds to stress, posture, fatigue, dehydration, and even small changes in your environment. If you've ever noticed your tinnitus flare up after a stressful day, or get worse when your neck is stiff, that's not a coincidence. The area around your ears is surrounded by muscles, nerves, and vessels that can easily tighten, compress, or misfire, sending signals to the auditory system that make the brain amplify the sound. When your neck muscles tense up, especially the ones right under the skull, they can affect the small structures inside your ear that depend on steady blood flow and balanced pressure. When they don't get that, the brain starts interpreting the imbalance as noise. Japanese doctors, especially those trained before the era of heavy medication, have always looked at tinnitus as a sign of this larger systemic imbalance rather than just an isolated ear issue. They focus on the entire pathway that influences hearing, which includes the skull muscles, the jaw joints, the upper spine, circulation patterns, and the nervous system. That's why techniques that target the surrounding area, not just the ear itself, tend to bring faster relief. The brain plays a huge role in how tinnitus is perceived. When your body is tense or stressed, your fight or flight system becomes more active, and this heightens your sensitivity to internal sounds. The auditory cortex becomes more alert, more reactive, and more likely to amplify the ringing. That's why tinnitus is louder at night when the world is quiet, but your mind is still tense. It's also why the same sound that felt manageable yesterday can feel unbearable today. The brain is always adjusting its sensitivity levels based on the body's internal state. When tension builds up around the ear, when circulation weakens in the neck, or when the jaw muscles tighten, the signals going to the brain get distorted, and the brain tries to fill the gap by creating its own noise. That's why many people experience tinnitus that changes tone, pitch, or volume depending on their posture or mood. The body is constantly influencing the noise. Understanding tinnitus as a full body system problem, not just an ear problem, is the first step toward real relief. It means relief is possible with simple resets that calm the muscles, restore circulation, balance nerve signals, and help the brain stop generating the false sound. Japan's oldest practicing doctor, Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, dedicated more than 70 years of his life to understanding the way the human body ages, adapts, and heals. And one of the areas he often focused on was the sensory system, especially hearing. He believed that tinnitus wasn't something people should simply live with, even though it affects millions of people worldwide. Instead, he saw it as a signal from the body, something that could be soothed or reset through gentle stimulation and muscular release, rather than through invasive treatment or heavy medication. One of the most remarkable things he taught was a simple 30-second technique that helps reset the auditory system by interrupting the constant noise loop that so many tinnitus sufferers struggle with. What makes his method so powerful is not that it's complicated, but that it's based on an extremely deep understanding of the anatomy around the ear and how the brain interprets sound. Dr. Hinohara noticed that many of his patients with tinnitus had similar patterns: tight muscles around the ear, stiffness in the upper neck, pressure in the skull base, and imbalances in the tiny auditory muscles that we rarely think about but use every single day. Through decades of clinical practice, he refined a technique that could quickly stimulate the acoustic pathways, relieve tension in the muscles that directly affect hearing, and interrupt the cycle of overactive auditory signaling. He would instruct patients to place their palms over their ears, creating a warm, sealed environment that immediately increases awareness of internal sound and softens external noise. Then, using their index fingers, they gently tapped the back of the skull, where the auditory nerves and small ear muscles connect. This tapping creates a deep, resonating vibration that travels through the bones and tissues, activating the tensor tympani and stapedius muscles, the two tiny muscles inside the middle ear that play a crucial role in regulating sound and pressure. What's fascinating is that when these muscles are gently stimulated, they can help recalibrate the way sound vibrations travel into the inner ear. In many people with tinnitus, these muscles become overly tense or locked due to stress, jaw clenching, or chronic neck tightness. The tapping technique works almost like a neuromuscular reset, sending a new signal to the brain that interrupts the tinnitus loop. Patients often reported that the ringing changed pitch, softened, or even disappeared temporarily within seconds. While it may sound simple, this moment of change is incredibly important because it shows the brain that the noise is not permanent and that the auditory system can be influenced. Dr. Hinohara paired this tapping method with a second step, releasing the tension under the ears and in the sides of the neck. He understood that tight facial and neck muscles directly affect the ear canal and the nerves that run behind it. By gently lifting the muscles under the ear and gliding downward along the neck, patients could relax the pressure pathways that contribute to tinnitus. This two-part sequence became one of his most trusted recommendations because it didn't rely on medication or machines, just the body's own ability to respond to touch, vibration, and relaxation. He believed that if you could interrupt the tinnitus cycle even once, you could retrain the brain with repetition, and many of his elderly patients confirmed that with daily practice, the ringing became softer, more manageable, and in some cases, faded completely. Covering the ears with the palms may feel like a simple gesture, but it has a powerful effect on the auditory system because it creates a warm, sealed space that immediately changes the way sound moves through the ear canal. When the outside world becomes quieter and the internal vibrations become more noticeable, the brain naturally shifts its focus inward, allowing the technique that follows to work even more effectively. Once the ears are gently covered, placing the index fingers on the back of the skull activates an area where several important auditory nerves and muscles converge. Tapping softly on this area sends a hollow, rhythmic vibration through the bones of the skull, which stimulates the tensor tympani and the stapedius, two of the smallest muscles in the human body. These muscles are responsible for dampening loud sounds and maintaining proper tension in the middle ear. When they become overly tight, fatigued, or misaligned due to stress, jaw tension, or poor posture, they can contribute to the dysfunctional signals that the brain interprets as tinnitus. The gentle tapping acts as a reset, sending new signals that encourage these tiny muscles to relax and regain balance. Many people who try this technique report feeling immediate changes in their tinnitus. Sometimes the pitch shifts, sometimes the volume lowers, and sometimes there is a sudden sense of pressure releasing. Even if the change is subtle, it signals that the auditory system is responding. This response is incredibly important because it breaks the mental belief that tinnitus is something fixed or permanent. The brain is always adjusting to the signals it receives, and by introducing new vibration patterns, you remind your auditory system that it can change. The technique works not only on the ear muscles but also on the surrounding nerves, particularly the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is responsible for transmitting sound and balance information to the brain. When this nerve becomes overstimulated or irritated, it can contribute to the phantom noises people hear as ringing or buzzing. The tapping vibration essentially interrupts this overstimulation, giving the nerve a moment to recalibrate. After the tapping, moving the thumbs under the ears to gently lift the muscles beneath them targets another major contributor to tinnitus: tension in the jaw and neck. The muscles in this area, especially the sternocleidomastoid and the masseter, are directly connected to the structures around the ear. When these muscles tighten from stress, long periods of sitting, clenching the jaw, or poor sleep posture, they can restrict blood flow and irritate the nerves that support hearing. The slight upward lift helps release built-up pressure, and the slow downward glide of the thumbs along the neck encourages relaxation of the vagus nerve pathway. This nerve plays a central role in calming the body's stress response, and when it becomes more active, the emotional intensity of tinnitus often decreases. As the muscles soften and circulation improves, the auditory system starts functioning more smoothly. The brain receives clearer, more accurate signals, reducing its need to fill in the gaps with artificial noise. This is why many people find the sound becomes less sharp or less intrusive after just a few repetitions of the technique. It's a physical reset combined with a neurological reset, working together to interrupt the tinnitus feedback loop. Over time, with consistent practice, the body learns to stay in this calmer, more balanced state, making the ringing less frequent and less overwhelming. Tinnitus often becomes worse, not because the ears themselves are deteriorating, but because the conditions around the auditory system make the brain more sensitive and reactive. Stress is one of the biggest triggers. When you're stressed, your muscles tighten, especially in the upper back, neck, and jaw, and this tension directly affects the tiny structures around the ear. The tightness compresses nerves, reduces circulation, and interferes with the natural flow of signals that help the brain interpret sound. This is why many people notice that their tinnitus spikes during stressful days, emotional moments, or periods of anxiety. Dehydration plays a similar role. When the body lacks fluids, the blood becomes thicker, circulation slows, and the delicate tissues of the ear don't receive the oxygen and nutrients they rely on. Even mild dehydration can increase the intensity of ringing. That's why something as simple as drinking more warm water throughout the day can make a noticeable difference. Poor posture, especially from long hours sitting at a desk or using a phone, is another hidden factor. When the head leans forward, the muscles at the base of the skull tighten to support the weight. Those muscles sit right next to the nerves connected to the ear and can easily create pressure and irritation. Many people don't even realize how often they clench their jaw, tighten their shoulders, or hold their breath throughout the day, all of which contribute to the worsening of tinnitus. Overuse of technology adds to the problem in two ways. First, through the physical posture it encourages, and second, through the constant sensory stimulation that keeps the nervous system on high alert. When the brain is overstimulated, it becomes more reactive to internal sounds like ringing or buzzing. The good news is that small daily adjustments can make a significant difference in how intensely tinnitus is experienced. Deep breathing, for example, increases oxygen flow and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which signals the body to relax and reduces the brain's sensitivity to internal noise. When you breathe deeply through the nose and exhale slowly, It not only calms the mind, but also relaxes the neck and facial muscles that pull on the auditory structures. Even 2 minutes of slow breathing can help lower the volume of tinnitus temporarily. Gentle neck mobility is another powerful tool. Moving the head slowly in circles, tilting it from side to side, or stretching the upper neck releases tension that builds up throughout the day. These motions help restore blood flow, loosen tight muscles, and reduce the nerve compression that often worsens tinnitus. Japanese doctors emphasize that you don't need intense exercises or long routines to support your auditory system. Instead, small, consistent habits throughout the day can keep the muscles flexible, the nervous system calm, and the circulation healthy. Warm herbal teas, short breathing sessions, gentle stretching, and mindful posture are all simple actions that calm the areas around the ear and reduce the triggers that make tinnitus flare up. When you combine these small habits with the 30-second reset technique, you amplify the benefits. The body becomes less reactive, the brain becomes less sensitive, and the intensity of the ringing naturally fades. Over time, these habits retrain the system to remain calmer, more balanced, and less prone to slipping into the tinnitus cycle. The brain is one of the most adaptable organs in the human body, and this adaptability is the key to understanding why tinnitus is not something permanent or fixed. Many people believe that once the ringing starts, it will stay forever. But that belief comes from not understanding how the brain processes sound. Tinnitus is often the brain's reaction to missing or distorted sound frequencies. When certain frequencies weaken because of aging, stress, or tension around the ear, the brain tries to fill the gap by creating a replacement sound. This replacement is what you perceive as ringing, buzzing, or humming, but just because the brain created that sound does not mean it cannot be retrained to stop creating it. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself, continues throughout your entire life, no matter your age. Whether you're in your 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or 80 seconds, the brain is still capable of rewiring neural patterns and forming new connections that calm the auditory system. This is where the Japanese reset technique becomes so important. When you use tapping, muscle release, and neck stimulation to disrupt the tinnitus loop, you are sending new sensory information into the brain. These new signals challenge the old pattern that the brain has been repeating, the pattern that produces the ringing. Even if the relief is temporary at first, it is still extremely important because it proves that the tinnitus pattern is interruptible. Every time you interrupt the pattern, you weaken the brain's habit of generating that false signal. Think of it like breaking a habit. The first interruption might feel small, but over time, as you repeat it, the brain begins to adopt the new pattern instead of the old one. Many people with tinnitus have moments when the sound becomes softer or changes tone. These moments are not random, they are signs of the brain adjusting and responding. When the Japanese technique stimulates the tiny muscles inside the ear and relaxes the tension in the neck and jaw, it improves the flow of sound information reaching the brain. With clearer signals, the brain no longer feels the need to invent noise. It stops guessing and starts listening more accurately. This is why some people notice the ringing becomes less sharp, less intrusive, or shifts to a lower pitch. These shifts are signs that the auditory system is responding to the new input. They are moments of neuroplastic change happening in real time. Another powerful aspect of retraining the brain is reducing the emotional attachment to the sound. When tinnitus first appears, many people panic or become fixated on the noise. This emotional reaction strengthens the brain's focus on the sound, making it louder and more persistent. But when you use the Japanese reset technique consistently, it calms not only the auditory system, but also the limbic system, the part of the brain involved in emotional responses. As the limbic system relaxes, the brain becomes less reactive to the ringing and the sound loses its power. Even if it's still there, it no longer triggers stress or anxiety, which naturally reduces the volume and intensity. With repeated practice, the brain begins to understand that silence is a safe state again. It no longer feels the need to create phantom noise to fill in missing frequencies. The more you interrupt the tinnitus loop, the more the brain adapts and the weaker the ringing becomes. Over time, the neural pathways responsible for generating tinnitus become less active, and the brain replaces them with calmer, more balanced patterns. This is why people who practice the technique daily often report gradual improvements, with some experiencing major reductions in just weeks. It's not magic, it's your brain responding, healing, and relearning how to listen without creating unnecessary noise. Practicing the 30-second Japanese method consistently every day can lead to profound long-term relief because it addresses tinnitus on multiple levels, physically, neurologically, and emotionally. The technique itself is deceptively simple, but repetition is what makes it effective. Each time you perform the tapping on the back of the skull, cover your ears, lift the muscles under the jaw, and glide down the neck, you are sending a new message to the brain and the auditory system. This repeated stimulation helps the tiny muscles inside the ear relax, improves blood flow to the auditory structures, and reduces pressure on the nerves responsible for transmitting sound signals. Over time, these small but consistent adjustments retrain the auditory system, interrupting the feedback loop that creates phantom ringing. The key is that the brain begins to recognize a new pattern, one of calm, balanced hearing, so that the tinnitus no longer dominates perception or causes discomfort. In addition to the physical effects, consistent practice of this method has a significant impact on the neurological pathways connected to hearing. When the brain repeatedly receives the reset signal from the tapping and muscle release, it starts to rewire the circuits responsible for processing sound. This neuroplasticity allows the brain to stop generating the artificial noise that makes tinnitus so persistent. Even if the ringing initially returns after a session, over time the intervals of silence become longer and the intensity of the sound diminishes. Many people report that after a few weeks of daily practice, the sound is no longer constant, and in some cases it almost disappears entirely. The repeated practice reinforces the brain's ability to distinguish between real external sounds and false internal signals, reducing the need for the auditory system to create its own noise. Each repetition strengthens this neural retraining process, which is why consistency is more important than intensity or duration. The emotional benefits of daily practice are equally important. Tinnitus can create a cycle of stress and anxiety because the brain associates the ringing with discomfort or fear. By practicing the 30-second reset consistently, the limbic system, which governs emotional responses, becomes calmer. The brain learns that the noise does not need to trigger panic, tension, or heightened focus. As a result, the emotional charge associated with tinnitus diminishes, making the ringing less intrusive even when it is present. This reduction in emotional reactivity further supports the physical and neurological effects, creating a positive feedback loop in which the body and brain reinforce one another's sense of calm. Over time, this holistic reset makes the auditory system more resilient, less sensitive to triggers, and less likely to amplify internal sounds. Daily repetition also trains the body's microcirculation and muscle flexibility around the ears, neck, and jaw. Tiny changes in tension, posture, and blood flow accumulate over days and weeks, gradually restoring balance in the structures that influence auditory perception. These improvements enhance the brain's ability to process sound accurately and reduce the likelihood of the tinnitus loop restarting. By combining physical relaxation, neurological retraining, and emotional calm, the 30-second method provides a comprehensive approach that addresses the root contributors to tinnitus. Regular practice transforms a brief, simple technique into a powerful tool for reclaiming quiet and restoring the body's natural ability to maintain balanced hearing. Over time, these small daily interventions result in lasting relief, giving the brain and body the chance to reset, heal, and operate in harmony without the constant distraction of ringing or buzzing.